Have you ever imagined facing a courtroom where you are accused of fraud that you didn't commit? What can you do when the justice system not only works against you, but also corners you? James Anderson, a single mother, had to endure an injustice no one expected. A case that seemed simple at first turned into a nightmare, forcing her to fight against a powerful force, from a judge full of contempt to a blatantly corrupt system. Can James overcome it all and win justice? Would you dare face your fears to protect the truth? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss inspiring and challenging stories. James Anderson couldn't believe what was happening. She stood in the courtroom, the lights above making every step feel like an insurmountable challenge. The coldness of the hard tile floor beneath her feet, the sighs in the air, the curious gazes from the public gallery. Everything felt like a weight pressing down on her heart. How could a courtroom like this exist? A single mother who had devoted her life to her work and family, accused of fraud with no credible evidence. Judge Warwick sat above her, his smirk freezing the entire room. Every word he spoke was like a sharp knife cutting into James's spirit. She wasn't the only one to notice this. She could feel the disdain in his gaze, in his words, as though James wasn't a human being, but just a pawn in an unfair game. But could James stand firm, facing all of this? When she looked toward her little daughter Brianna, waiting for her at home, she felt an invisible strength, a hope that couldn't be extinguished. How could she give up when her daughter was watching? Could justice prevail? Or was all of this just a trap to push her into a deep, inescapable hole? At this point, James had no choice but to fight. She clenched her fists, ready to face this confrontation. But when Judge Warwick began to deliver his verdict, an unexpected twist made James freeze. Would the truth finally be revealed? Unanswered questions made her heart race faster than ever, like a warrior in a life-or-death battle. James Anderson's heart pounded in her chest as she looked at the plain, white envelope she had just received. Her eyes narrowed, unable to believe what she was seeing. A summons from the High Court, with no sender's name, only serious accusations, fraud and breach of contract at Crestview Bank. She stood frozen, unable to comprehend. How could this be? She, a single mother who had worked tirelessly for years to raise Brianna, her beloved daughter, caught up in such a dangerous game? Maya, no. James had given everything, never once having a stain on her career. She lived a quiet life, diligently working every day, from early morning to late night, just to provide for herself and Brianna. And now she was facing accusations from nowhere. The feeling of unease and confusion flooded her. What had she done wrong? How could she convince anyone she was innocent when everything seemed to be against her? But when James saw Brianna, her daughter's innocent gaze was like a guiding light. How could she give up with her daughter beside her? A mother's love was the only thing keeping her from breaking. James's only hope right now was the truth, and she believed that as long as she didn't give up, the truth would eventually come to light. But was that hope too far out of reach? She placed the summons down, trying to regain her composure. But the questions kept haunting her. Was there someone behind this scheme? And did she have the strength to face all the dark forces waiting to crush her? In that moment, James couldn't help but feel that her life had taken a turn she never saw coming. What lay ahead would be a life-or-death battle, and James wasn't going to let herself be easily defeated. James Anderson felt a chill fill the room as her gaze landed on Judge Warwick. He sat at the highest position, a smirk of contempt on his face. Every decision he made not only weighed heavily on James's fate, but also overshadowed the fragile hope still left in her. She knew something was wrong. The fraud accusations didn't come from her, but from dark forces she had never known. James felt like a pawn in the game of the powerful, but why? Why was she the target? How could a single mother who spent her days working hard to support her family be dragged into such a grand scheme? She wondered to herself, could Judge Warwick truly be innocent? Or was he the one who had crafted all these accusations, using her as a scapegoat to cover up an even darker truth that everyone else was trying to hide? Every time her eyes met Warwick's, she felt the corruption, the rot creeping into every one of his decisions. James couldn't fathom it. How could a judge turn an innocent person into a criminal just because of greed and power? Could James find a way out, or was she trapped too deeply to save herself? Amid the despair, a glimmer of light appeared. A friend, an unexpected ally, could help her expose the truth. But would James have enough time and courage to fight corruption? Or would everything collapse under the brutality of those in power? She wondered, would anyone believe in her innocence? Each question made her feel like she was standing on the edge of collapse. James Anderson stood before the mirror, looking at her face, her tired eyes but still gleaming with unyielding determination. She knew she was in an uneven fight, no lawyer to defend her, no money to hire a protector of justice. All she had was the truth, a fragile hope, and a heart full of defiance. But would that be enough to defeat a system that had buried her innocence? She wasn't sure, but James had no other choice. She couldn't let herself fall, not when her daughter Brianna was waiting at home, trusting in her mother. She couldn't let her grow up in a world where justice had no meaning. The sleepless nights, each legal document she studied on her own, every step she took while knowing she was up against a power far too great. But James's hope never flickered. Every word she spoke, every answer she prepared for court, was a declaration of war against injustice. The surprise came when a friend, investigative journalist Joseph White, unexpectedly contacted her. He had been following James's case, and now he was ready to help. However, James couldn't quite believe her luck. Could she really shed light on the truth before it was too late? Every step forward was fraught with hidden dangers, but James knew she couldn't stop. The road ahead was full of obstacles, but she was ready to face them, not for herself, but for the love she had for Brianna. The question still echoed in her mind. Could the truth overcome the corruption and violence of the system? She didn't know, but she would fight until the end. After each trial, James Anderson felt heavier, as if the walls around her were slowly tightening. All she had was the truth, but was the truth strong enough to break through the powerful forces she was up against? As she skimmed through the legal documents, her hands trembled, thinking about her daughter Brianna, who was waiting for her at home every day, her innocent gaze like a flickering light in the dense darkness. Just then, an unexpected phone call made James's heart stop. Joseph White, a well-known investigative journalist, someone she had never met, was calling her. He said he had been following her case for a while and had some important information. James felt like a sudden ray of light pierced the fog of her life. Joseph wasn't just a journalist. He was an unexpected ally who could help her uncover the truth. Could she trust him? Or was this just another trap? Joseph didn't just provide information. He connected her with the FBI. Things started to change. Each meeting, each exchange of information with Joseph felt like a powerful awakening for James. The FBI began investigating deeper into the people behind the case, and important clues began to surface. But the big question still loomed. Would they have enough time to gather the evidence before the next trial? Could James uncover the truth and prove her innocence? Or would she become just another piece in a power game she couldn't control? Her love for Brianna was her only motivation, and the hope for justice was slowly being rekindled. But would this story end in victory, or would it just be another dream full of regret? James didn't know, but one thing she was sure of: she would not give up. James Anderson felt every beat of her heart thundering in her chest as she looked at the new documents Joseph White had brought. She had never imagined that one day she would be standing here, waiting for evidence to prove her innocence. Everything had become so tense, and the fear grew stronger within her as the trial loomed. Could James uncover the truth before everything fell apart? Or would she remain trapped in a conspiracy she had never seen coming? With Joseph's help, everything started to change. He had provided a series of crucial pieces of information, connecting suspicious transactions and secret exchanges between Harold Whitcomb, the director of Crestview Bank, and Judge Warwick. The excitement surged within James as she realized that this conspiracy was much bigger than she had imagined. They had orchestrated everything, trapping her like a pawn in the game of the powerful. Why did they do this? How could she be the target of such a monstrous plot? But then an unexpected twist occurred. The FBI had investigated and uncovered suspicious financial transactions that Harold Whitcomb had conducted using his power to manipulate bank accounts and cover up his tracks. Along with this evidence, they also discovered a suspicious link between Judge Warwick and Whitcomb, a connection no one had expected. Together, they had fabricated false charges, turning James into the enemy in a power game she never consented to. The hope that James had kept buried inside her now began to turn into reality. This information was the key to exposing the truth. But the big question remained. Could Judge Warwick and Whitcomb escape this whirlwind? Or would the truth finally be revealed, and justice would prevail? When James realized she was no longer alone, the connection between her, Joseph, and the FBI became an unstoppable force. They were ready to bring these criminals to light. Although the road ahead was still full of challenges, James could finally breathe a sigh of relief. She was no longer fighting just for herself, but for justice, for Brianna's future, and for others like her. Those who had been pushed into the darkness because of the greed of those in power. The long, endless days facing injustice, each trial a heavy blow to her dignity and belief in justice. But today, perhaps, would be the last day she had to endure. The small hope she had clung to for so long was finally beginning to turn into reality. A sudden phone call from Joseph White changed everything. He informed her that the FBI had officially gathered enough evidence to prove her innocence. Clear evidence pointed to the corruption and conspiracy involving Judge Warwick and Harold Whitcomb. James couldn't believe her ears. All she had endured, the doubt, the loneliness, the despair, could now be repaid. With the help of the FBI and Joseph, the conspirators were arrested. Judge Warwick, the one who had once smirked at her with contempt, now had to face punishment. The questions James had asked herself, why me? Can the truth win? Finally had an answer. Justice wasn't only served for her, but for those who had been suffering in silence, those who had been crushed by a corrupt system. When James was freed, it felt like a wave crashing down. Joy and relief surged through her, but in that moment, there was also a hint of regret. It was regret for everything that had been lost. The years, the relationships destroyed, the wounds that could never be healed. But now she knew she had won. And most importantly, she could go home, hold her daughter Brianna in her arms, and teach her that justice will always prevail, no matter how many challenges it takes. James Anderson didn't just want to regain her freedom. Now she had an even stronger reason to fight. She had endured pain, injustice, and countless emotional shocks. But what she had learned from this journey was, such a system could no longer continue to exist. People like her, innocent people pushed to the wall, couldn't be victims of corruption and injustice forever. Looking back on the months she had been cast out of society, forced to endure unfairness because of the power of those in charge, James felt a fiery anger rise within her. How many others had been and were still suffering like her? This question haunted her every day. She could no longer accept the silence in the face of this abuse of power. James decided to stand up, not only to protect her own rights, but also to protect others stripped of their right to live, their right to freedom. She began preparing to file a lawsuit against Crestview Bank, which had been involved in the conspiracy to destroy her life. And she also started planning to call for judicial reforms, a system that had once made her feel unworthy of protection. When she stood in front of the court this time, it wasn't just about avenging herself. It was a battle for justice for all those who had been overlooked. Could she turn the tide? Could she create real change? Or would she again be just one person fighting in a world of the powerful? She didn't know, but one thing she was sure of, she wouldn't give up. She loved justice, she loved the truth, and she loved the people who had stood by her throughout this journey. Finally, James Anderson found the peace she had longed for. After all the months of fighting against the corrupt justice system, sleepless nights, and countless moments standing on the brink of despair, she felt as though she had been set free. But it wasn't freedom for herself, it was for her daughter Brianna, who had always been the only motivation keeping her from giving up. She looked at her daughter, her innocent eyes never having witnessed the cruelty of the world. Brianna would never know how much her mother had endured, but she would know that now her mother was a symbol of hope and strength. Each morning, James woke up with a sense of peace, but also a deep responsibility. Her life was no longer the same. She was not only the mother caring for Brianna, but also a warrior, continuing to fight for those who had been pushed aside by society. But in those quiet moments with her daughter, watching Brianna play, James realized that there were things more important than justice: love, connection, and the simple moments she had sacrificed throughout her journey. James's hope had been reignited, and she knew she would never stop fighting for justice. But there was one truth James knew. She had found peace not in victory, but in understanding that she had done everything possible to create a better future for Brianna. Could she change society? The answer wasn't clear, but one thing was certain. James would continue to live for the things she loved and for a more just world. James Anderson's story was not an easy one, a battle not only for her own justice, but for those who had been crushed by an invisible but powerful corrupt system. She had lost so much time, countless sleepless nights and tears to finally understand that not every fight can be won in a day. But the most important lesson was never to give up. Never let fear cloud the belief in the truth. Looking back on those dark days, James couldn't help but feel regret. She had lost precious years fighting against those without compassion, but those trials had made her stronger. She had learned how to fight without compromising, how to stand tall against any force. People like her, those without a voice, those forced into unfair generations, could stand up and change their lives. The hope James had always carried in her heart was what guided her through the long days filled with doubt. She always believed that justice would prevail, that the truth would come to light no matter how difficult the journey. And when she stood at the end of the road, where the light of justice finally shone, James understood that she wasn't just fighting for herself, but for everyone who had been pushed into the shadows, for those who never had the chance to speak the truth. James's story is a powerful message of perseverance and determination. She proved that no matter how corrupt the system is, no matter how harsh life may be, the truth will always find its way to light. She defeated absurdity, and in that moment, James understood that her life had changed not only because of her personal victory, but also because of the changes within the entire society. James was not only a mother who defeated the system, but also a symbol of a movement. She stood firm, one hand gripping her belief, the other reaching for the future. Not just her own, but the future of people like her. Justice will finally prevail, James told herself, and that is the message she wants the world to remember. James Anderson's story provides a profound lesson about the power of perseverance, courage, and never giving up. Despite facing a corrupt system and unimaginable challenges, James refused to be defeated. She taught us that in the darkest times, when everything seems to be against us, truth and justice can still prevail if we don't stop fighting. The biggest lesson from James's story is the importance of protecting our belief in ourselves and never backing down, even when facing challenges that seem insurmountable. Patience, persistence, and the ability to see the goal within reach, no matter how small, are the keys to overcoming adversity. At the same time, the story reminds us that in every fight for justice, we are never alone. Just like James, we can find unexpected allies, people who are always ready to stand for truth and fairness. James's story is not just a personal journey, but also proof that systems can change if we persist and keep our faith in justice. It reminds us that every small action, every right decision, can lead to a monumental change for ourselves and society.